House of the Dragon Season 2 has finally come to an end. The grand civil war between the Targaryens is on a knife edge in the grand finale of Season 2, Episode 8 of House of the Dragon, and Jesus Christ, this is what peak Game of Thrones looks like. Hello everyone, I'm Finn. Welcome back to FinFilms. Join me today as we discuss and explain everything that happened in the season finale of Season 2 of House of the Dragon, an absolutely insane episode, an episode where, after weeks of teasing, the Wild Dragon Sheepstealer is finally revealed. As well, we see a young three-eyed raven, and Daemon has a vision of Daenerys Targaryen? Now, I've said this many times throughout my House of the Dragon Season 2 videos, but this show might easily be one of the best shows I have seen in years. From its absolutely amazing scale of epicness, to the amazing performances of its actors, to just its absolutely epic story. And to be fair, this is the Dance of the Dragons we're talking about, so it had to be epic, but goddamn, did they nail it. So episode 8 of the House of the Dragons opens with Lord Lannister discussing terms with the Tyroshi pirates on getting their aid to help break the blockade on King's Landing that has been starving the city and causing unrest amongst the small folk. Here we are introduced to Admiral Sheriko of the Tyroshi fleet, an almost female Blackbeard type character that wants Lord Lannister to prove himself before she will pledge her fleet to their cause. We then flash over to Aemond on Vhagar, who has just burned the castle of Sharpoint, the castle of Lord Massey, one of the lords who has declared for Rhaenyra. This is really like the first time we've seen Aemond show fear since he was just a small little boy early in Season 1 before he had ever claimed Vhagar, and we know that Aemond does not really take being humiliated very lightly, so in classic Aemond fashion, he chose to lash out with violence, burning down the city. We then flash back to King's Landing to see a recovering Aegon, who is being counseled by Lord Larys. Larys telling Aegon that they need to flee the city because Aemon will likely kill him, and that they can return to the city once the fighting begins, and Aegon will be hailed as a savior. We then get the first of many Raena scenes in the Vale in this episode, them very obviously teasing Raena finally claiming a dragon, specifically this wild dragon, aka Sheepstealer, as we finally see Sheepstealer for the first time later in this episode, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Back to Dragonstone, where Jace has a standoff with the new dragon riders, Ulf and Hugh. Ulf is still as brash and disrespectful as ever and has no idea who Jace is at first. We see that his nature, Ulf specifically, has not really changed at all after having claimed a dragon, and Jace is still not pleased with the fact that commoners have now claimed dragons, as in the show, he views dragons as the key to his birthright and his legitimacy as the heir. Foreshadowing anyone? Next, a quick scene with Corlys and Rhaenyra on Driftmark, Rhaenyra hoping her new dragon riders would serve as a deterrent, but Corlys advises her that she must strike quickly and hard now that they have the advantage. Over to Daemon in Harrenhal, where we see his massive army has gathered here, an army over 30,000 strong. Here he meets with Sir Alfred, the man who was sent by Rhaenyra a few episodes ago. Alfred, to our surprise, betraying Rhaenyra's interests, telling Daemon that he wishes for him to take control, as in his word, the realm needs a strong king. This conversation happening in front of the Godswood, in front of the Werewood tree, and if you know anything about Game of Thrones lore, or if you've read the books or watched Season 1 of Game of Thrones, you know that a conversation in front of a Werewood tree is not really a private conversation now, is it? In King's Landing, Alicent wants to run away with Helena, but they are interrupted by a furious Aemon, who commands Helena to mount her dragon, Dreamfire. Dreamfire being one of the oldest dragons still living outside of Vhagar and Vermithor. But Helena has no intentions to fight. Helena being revealed in this episode as being a Targaryen dragon dreamer, a person who receives prophetic visions of the future, but again, we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Back to Tyrosh, where we have this kind of fun set of comedic scenes, specifically of Lord Lannister mud wrestling with the Admiral, Lannister getting his absolute ass kicked, until finally he earns the pirates' respect. On Dragonstone, Baela attempts to talk some sense into Jace, who has been sulking, Baela telling him to stand by his mother's side, and then we get another teaser scene for Raena looking for Sheepstealer in the Vale, until again we are back in Tyrosh at a banquet, where the Admiral finally declares that her ships will sail for King Aegon against the blockade. This dinner scene was absolutely hilarious. All of the Tyroshi scenes were kind of funny, seeing Lord Lannister's reaction to the insane environment around him that he has suddenly found himself in. It's almost like we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. show type moment. And then finally, they hit us with this even funnier moment in the very end of this scene where the Admiral asks Lord Lannister to impregnate her wives. Back to Dragonstone, where we see Rhaenyra is having a feast with her dragon riders. Ulf is still being an ass and a bit of a fool and just a cocky man altogether. Rhaenyra telling them that they will be knighted once the war is over, and she tells them to prepare to fly off to battle in 2 days' time, as she has taken Lord Corlys's advice to strike quickly. Until suddenly, this scene is interrupted when Rhaenyra receives news from Sir Strong in Harrenhal that he fears Daemon might be being disloyal to her. Over to Harrenhal when Daemon is suddenly awakened by a creepy Alice Rivers who is sitting at the foot of his bed as she takes him to the Godswood outside the castle. Here we finally get the culmination of Daemon's arc in Season 2 and all of Daemon's strange vision and dream scenes that we've seen throughout Season 2, as finally we see what Alice has been preparing Daemon for since the moment he arrived in Harrenhal. Daemon reaching out, touching the weirwood, with George R. Martin's face on it, by the way, where he is blasted with an absolutely insane vision. First, we see a young Brynden Rivers, better known as the Three-Eyed Crow, a character we are introduced to in Game of Thrones, a character who is a green seer with the ability to shape change and see visions of the future, and who has embedded himself in the weirwood network, allowing him to see through the trees himself and to send visions to people throughout the world. A man as well who is a distant relative to Daemon, as he is a bastard child of King Aegon Targaryen IV, and he is born some 40 years later after the Dance of the Dragons. Brynden, the Three-Eyed Crow, or better known as Bloodraven to some, even wielding Daemon's Valyrian steel blade, Dark Sister. We then are taken to the north where we see a quick scene of the marching army of the White Walkers, next to a bloody battlefield littered with the bodies of men and dragons, a vision of the extinction of dragons in Westeros. As Daemon then walks through this battlefield, stepping into a pool of water as suddenly he tumbles beneath the surface of a great river, most likely a lake, most likely the God's Eye, as this is a vision of Daemon's death. Next, a vision of a great red comet, the comet being an omen in Game of Thrones, specifically an omen of the prophecy of Azor Ahai. Next, a flash of dragon eggs, the 3 eggs given to Daenerys that she ultimately hatches in Game of Thrones, as we see her bring dragons back to the world of Westeros, the vision ending with Daemon seeing Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne, as he turns, seeing his niece Helena, who tells him that this is all a story and he is just one part in it. This is really like a major pivotal character moment for Daemon, as we've seen Daemon struggle with like his lust, his want for the throne, his perceived rejection by his own brother, and his anger at Rhaenyra for taking what he believes belongs to him. Finally, though, Daemon is given some perspective that he is just one small part of a much greater story, the story of Ice and Fire, a story that encompasses more than just he and Rhaenyra in the Dance of the Dragons, the Civil War of the Targaryens, but the future of the realm as a whole, the story with Dany and the White Walkers, and this fact ultimately changes him forever. Daemon is easily my favorite character in House of the Dragon and in the story of the Dance of the Dragons, and seeing the way that the show has really kind of fleshed out his story and his character, specifically in Season 2, has easily been my favorite part of this season, Daemon's moments in Harrenhal and all of these visions. I'm going to talk more about this vision in my spoiler section towards the end of the video, as this vision does kind of tease some spoilers for the Dance of the Dragons, so if you want to learn more about that, make sure you stay tuned until the end of the video to check that out. As Daemon's vision ends, we move over to Elena in King's Landing, who just finished speaking to Daemon, the show finally revealing and even confirming that Elena is a dragon dreamer with the ability to see visions, something they've been teasing since Season 1 and all those weird young Helena scenes. Helena is confronted once again by Aemon, who asks her to once again to ride out on Dreamfire, her dragon, and aid him in battle, but again Elena refuses him, pointedly telling him that she saw what he did to Aegon, how he burned him and let him fall at the Battle of Rook's Rest. Again, the show confirming that Elena has the ability to see visions of the future, likely through dragon dreams, as Elena is not the first Targaryen to receive such dreams, and she definitely is not the last. We then get what is probably my favorite scene in the entire episode, these absolutely insane epic shots of Harrenhal and Daemon's massive army as we see Rhaenyra and Adam fly to the castle on their dragons. Again, these scenes were absolutely freaking epic. The level of CGI work is just absolutely insane what they have to do here to bring this massive castle to light, as again, Harrenhal is easily the biggest castle in all of Westeros, and man did they do a great job in kind of rendering it. Here we see Rhaenyra finally confirm confront Daemon on where his loyalties truly lie, but Daemon, to her surprise, is now a changed man. He has seen the greater picture and the winter that is to come, and now he understands that it is his job to ensure that Rhaenyra sits the Iron Throne in order to unite the realm and for him to play his part in this grand story of ice and fire, as Daemon takes the knee, swearing loyalty to her in front of 30,000 men. From here, we move back to Driftmark as Alan of Hull finally confronts his bastard father, Lord Corlys. Alan telling Corlys how hard it was for him growing up, as well as with his brother, knowing who their father was, but being forced to scrape to survive, and the sheer audacity that now Corlys, who has lost his entire family, has chosen this point in his life to start caring about Alan and Adam. This was a really powerful scene that was really due to the absolutely amazing performance from my man Abu Bakr, who put on another actually really good acting clinic, most recently with his guest appearance on Critical Role in their most recent miniseries Downfall, which I highly recommend to all my fellow D&D nerds out there. Next, after multiple episodes of teasing, we finally get our first look at the wild dragon Sheepstealer, the wild dragon that in the show is roaming the Vale as Raena runs to claim it. I did a whole video last week about the biggest change so far in House of the Dragons 2 Fire in Blood, and it is this moment right here. It is how House of the Dragon is positioning Raena to claim the dragon Sheepstealer, something that does not happen in the original source material in the original story, as this dragon actually has a different rider, specifically a bastard named Nettles. If you're curious to know more about this change to the show, then don't forget to check out that video, which I will put here above in the eye. From here, we move to the second to last scene of our 90-minute episode, where, to our surprise, Alicent comes to Dragonstone to have a secret meeting with Rhaenyra, mirroring the secret meeting that Rhaenyra has with Alicent early on in Season 2. Here, Alicent tells Rhaenyra that she has had enough, and that she wants to just sail off into the sunset and take Olenna with her. Alicent telling Rhaenyra that Aegon will be flying out to meet with Cole to attack Harrenhal in 3 days' time, and when he does so, she will tell the castle guard to lay down their arms, so that Rhaenyra can fly in and claim the throne for herself in King's Landing. Alicent, in a super surprising move, betraying the Greens and her family, especially surprising considering everything that Alicent has done so far to put her family and her son into power, but now, though, Alicent seems to accept the way this war is going, especially after losing so much power and losing many people that she loves. Alicent accepting that Rhaenyra will have to take her son Aegon's head, so that he will never try to usurp her again, to which Alicent seems to agree to. The final shot of Season 2 of House of the Dragons is an absolutely amazing series, a montage scene of all of the characters and really all of the many moving parts of this grand war all together. We see Ulf, Hugh, and Adam preparing for war. Alicent's youngest son Darren riding on his blue dragon Tessarion over the Hightower army as they march to Harrenhal. The old men of the north crossing the Bridge of the Twins in this fucking epic shot. The army of the Lannisters entering the Riverlands, again marching on Harrenhal. Daemon in full armor looking over his 30,000 soldiers. Lord Lannister sailing with his fleet of Tyroshi pirates to the blockade. Lord Corlys and Alan setting sail on their new ship. Raena finally coming face to face with the dragon Sheepstealer in an absolutely epic scene. Otto Hightower in a random cell somewhere. Lord Larys and King Aegon fleeing King's Landing. And finally, these dueling shots of Alicent and Rhaenyra with this fucking sick shot of Rhaenyra through the mini scrolls of Dragonstone as Season 2 of House of the Dragon finally comes to an end. In this next section of the video, I'm going to be briefly discussing some kind of potential spoilers for House of the Dragon and for Fire and Blood as a story. If you want to avoid spoilers, then please skip to the time on screen now to check out my final review and final thoughts of Season 2 of House of the Dragon as a whole. Okay, so real quick, we need to go back to Daemon's dream sequence in this episode once again, where we see Daemon get a glimpse of the fallout of the Dance of the Dragons, specifically the extinction of the dragons, as the Dance of the Dragons would basically ultimately result in the deaths of most of the adult dragons in our story that we've seen so far, and then ultimately eventually lead to the extinction of dragons in Westeros, really not that long after the end of the Dance of the Dragons, some 20 to 50 years later. As well, the show does something a little ballsy, 3 actually giving us a teaser of Daemon's death, specifically the scene in which he falls into the water, Daemon falling into the water of the God's Eye. Again, this is a very obvious reference, in my opinion, to Daemon's death, specifically his epic duel with his nephew Aemon One Eye, as towards the end of the war, Daemon and Caraxes would meet Aegon and Vhagar at Harrenhal over the Lake of the God's Eye. Caraxes biting Vhagar in the neck, allowing Daemon to leap from the red dragon, driving his blade into Aemon's empty eye socket, the two of them reportedly plummeting from their dragons into the God's Eye Lake below, into which they are never seen again, presumed dead, along with both their dragons, Vhagar and Caraxes, who also both die in this fight. I also really love how they're connecting the story of Dany and the White Walkers from Game of Thrones into House of the Dragons, specifically in Aegon's dream of ice and fire and this prophecy of the prince that was promised. I think it makes for some really epic world building and really kind of helps right some of the wrongs of those last seasons of Game of Thrones, even if it is just like very partially doing so. And yes, season 2 of House of the Dragons has finally come to an end as things are about to get absolutely insane. Things are on an absolute knife edge, and it seems like season 3 of House of the Dragon is going to be filled with all sorts of crazy violent moments and many battle scenes. I had a few friends who were a little bit disappointed. They felt kind of blue-balled by the end of Season 2 of House of the Dragons, as Season 1 and Season 2 are very much kind of setups for Season 3 and the possible Season 4. I'm not sure if they have confirmed a Season 4. Let me know in the comments down below if they have. I assume they have, because I would be absolutely shocked if they wrapped House of the Dragon in just 3 seasons. That seems kind of crazy to me. In my opinion, though, I think this is really good. I think that using Seasons 1 and Season 2 as really a setup for this grand civil war and all of the violence and bloodshed that is to come, because trust me, guys, as we saw from the Battle of Rook's Rest, there is much violence and much death to come, as when dragons face off in the sky of one another, what are men to do but simply watch and hope not to burn? For all those who wanted more action in House of the Dragon so far, I am sympathetic to you, and trust me, you will be paid off in Season 3 of House of the Dragons, as there will be much bloodshed, there will be much fire, and there will be much blood. In my opinion, though, I really love what the show is doing. I think that this show is absolutely amazing. It is absolutely epic. Everything about the show is epic, from its amazing performances from all of its actors, its fleshing out from all of these really interesting characters, the way it depicts all of these amazing sets and landscapes, the fact that they CGI'd all of Harrenhal, but at the same time they also built 2 massive sets, one of the interior of Harrenhal, and even built a whole entire King's Landing set. This show is like truly like epic in its scale and in its production. It's even more epic than a very ambitious project like the making of the Lord of the Rings films back in the early 2000s. This is even more epic than that, and I really do truly think that it had to be this epic to do the story justice, as the Dance of the Dragons, this civil war of the Targaryens, is one of the most like epic, insane moments in all of like Game of Thrones lore that we know so far. So in order to get this story right, and in my opinion do it justice, I think it had to be this epic, and I think that they just are absolutely nailing it, in my opinion. I'll be very curious to see how they depict Season 3 of House of the Dragons. It very much seems like things are going to start off with a bang with this battle at Harrenhal, as we are seeing in this final montage scene. All of these different elements converge on to Harrenhal. As well, Rhaenyra is now faced with a choice to fly off to battle with her Dragon's Riders or to trust Alicent and fly to King's Landing, though at the same time we've seen that Aegon has left King's Landing, so if Rhaenyra were to fly to King's Landing and take the Iron Throne, she would not be able to behead Aegon and ultimately attempt to end the war, as Aegon has fled. As well, there are all these other like twists and turns and plot twists we have in store for us in Season 3 of House of the Dragons, like what is going on with Otto Hightower, what happened to this man, why is he in a cell, where the hell is he? As well, I imagine in Episode 1 of Season 3 of House of the Dragons, we are going to get better introduced to the 2 new dragons that were introduced in this episode, along with their characters, specifically Prince Daemon, the rider of the Blue Dragon Tessarion, Prince Daemon being the youngest son of Alicent, who was sent to ward in Hightower, who we haven't seen like at all the entire show so far, but who will seemingly be making an appearance and playing a prominent role in Season 3, along with Raena claiming her new dragon, Sheepstealer, the Wild Dragon. Like I said, this is easily one of the biggest changes that the show House of the Dragons has made to the source material so far, and it's a change that I actually like and I think is really good, but I'll be very curious to see how that change plays out in the story of House of the Dragon and what other major changes that they'll be making to this story, ultimately by the time that it concludes. As well, again, there was Daemon's dream sequence. They hit us with so much in Daemon's dream sequence. I love all of the references to Game of Thrones lore and the kind of linking of Game of Thrones lore, A Song of Ice and Fire, the story of Daenerys and Jon and the White Walkers, that winter is coming, Aegon's prophecy of A Song of Ice and Fire, and how it really links everything together. I think it really does make for some really cool, awesome world building, as these stories are linked. At the end of the day, Daenerys is a relative to Daemon and to Rhaenyra. Their stories are all in a one big story in a very long line that is, Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. Ultimately, Rhaenyra and Daemon's decisions and their interactions, as well as all of the story that is being played out here, do affect the story of Game of Thrones, do affect the story of Daenerys and everything that plays out post-Dance of the Dragons, leading to Robert's rebellion and Daenerys being forced to flee into the free cities of Essos, and then her story of the hatching of the dragons, the bringing back of the dragons to Westeros. As we know from the fallout of Dance of the Dragons, that ultimately dragons do go extinct onto Westeros for a number of years. I think for like over 100 years plus, dragons are basically extinct from Westeros until Daenerys births her 3 dragons in the finale of season 1 of Game of Thrones. Again, I really do think that House of the Dragons is like peak Game of Thrones. I think that they learned from a lot of the mistakes in the final seasons of Game of Thrones, and they're really kind of righting those wrongs with this show. I think that this is one of the best shows I've seen in like 5 years, hands down. Obviously, I'm a bit biased because I am a Game of Thrones stan, as well as a major lover of fantasy genres in the writings of George R. Martin. But honestly, I really do think that this is a great interpretation and adaptation of one of George's most epic moments in the history of Westeros onto our screens. And I am dying to see season 3 of House of the Dragons. It just sucks that we're going to probably have to wait most likely 2 years before we get to return to Westeros in House of the Dragons once more. House of the Dragons Season 2, fantastic, 9 out of 10. Again, though, with these videos, these are just my thoughts and opinions, so feel free to let me know yours in the comment section down below. Let me know what was your favorite moment from Season 2 of House of the Dragons, and what are you looking forward to in Season 3 of House of the Dragons. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to help support me to keep these videos coming and to put this video into the algorithm. If you did enjoy this content and you want to see other of my House of the Dragons content, then please why don't you check out one of the other videos on screen now. As always, guys, thank you so much for continuing to support me. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace, love, adu.